All right, 4050 family, we're back at it. This is actually our first episode of the summer. We've been busy. We got some stuff going on. We're going to get
Come
into
on,
that at some
come
other
on.
point, but for this, we're going to jump right in because we got a big one for you right now. Have any of you all ever looked up one day and just realized that you've been living alongside your spouse, alongside your partner, instead of really living with them? And I'm not talking right now about like getting into some huge fight. I'm not even talking about cheating. Instead, what I'm talking about, or what we're talking about here, is something that's almost harder to explain. So, like, think about this. According to a 2023 Pew
Wow.
Research study, married Black men report both the highest life satisfaction and the highest emotional distance from their partner. And what is that distance that gradually winds up being created? It's the different bedtimes, it's the different nighttime routines or morning routines. It's the different size of the couch you all wind up sitting on. It's that
Yep,
space. Right,
yep.
right. And it's that space that I think
Wow.
exists and develops between the two pillows that used to be about y'all touching one another. And so the scary part, I think, to it is that you usually can't point to the exact date or the exact moment that it happened. Life just keeps lifing. You know, the kids
Yeah.
get older, careers get busier, your body changes, her body changes. And before you know it, you're sharing a house with somebody you absolutely still love and adore. But at the same time, you all just don't feel as connected to one another as you used to. And I think that's what this episode is really all about.
Get it.
All right, so this topic, man, is definitely something that's kind of taboo. It may make people feel a little uncomfortable because it's kind of a topic that we really don't talk about as men, but we know it's there. And we
Mhm.
realize that we don't always have probably that confidence to talk about it because the man is always supposed to be the hunter, the one that's
Mm.
always like, strong like bull, but that time ain't always strong. You know what I'm saying? So want to talk about, and definitely I'm gonna give my perspective on when I think desire starts to shift. And I feel like it happens for me like in my 40s. Now I know I've only been
Mm.
married for less than a year, but I can think about, they say in your first year you're supposed to be strong like bull every night. But at the same time, I think when you start to mature in your 40s, certain things start to shift. I think for me, I realized life was important and me accomplishing certain goals. And, my desire and my sex drive had changed because I was so focused on getting the most out of every day. By the time it come time for
Mm.
that, I'm tired. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's nothing against my partner. It's mainly also how I'm balancing my own energy on my stress and my
Mm.
ability to be present so that when it's time for that intimacy to happen, I still have energy for it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's that's something that I think, and then that impacts, she don't think I desire her no more. No, it ain't necessarily the case. It's
Right.
probably
Right.
there's some things going
Mhm.
on with me too, where I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I'm maximizing my life and I'm not
Mm.
always saving enough gas in the tank for something that's extremely important, if not more important than me chasing after something else. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I can't help but think about, when did you realize things started to change, your desire, your sex drive, things like that? When did you realize things started to change? I mean, CJ, what you think?
Yeah, it's one that I like. I can think back to knowing that it was happening over the course of time. So for me, I would say it was after we moved from Columbus, Ohio to LA back in 2012, because we moved into a house that was like damn near half the size of the house that we had back in Columbus. And then in fact, our new house, like the bedroom in LA, we shared a wall with the bedroom that our girls now share. They used to have separate bedrooms and they lived in Columbus. Suddenly they're living in the same room and it's a paper thin wall away from our bedroom. So we start, we're trying to be discreet and not like do all that when the girls are awake or can hear anything. Now, when they were little, and this before we moved out to LA, when they were little, finding that time to get intimate was easy. It wasn't a big deal. Like they go to sleep and then we could have a whole bedroom life all to our own that they barely knew about. But then they became
Yeah.
teenagers. And that was around the time our oldest became a teenager around the time that we moved out here. And we all know teenagers just don't sleep. Like they suddenly started going to
They don't
bed,
sleep, boy.
staying up later than
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are and going to bed after us. So that caused us to adjust our intimate time a little
Come
bit.
on, come
But
on.
that one little adjustment became another adjustment, became another adjustment. The next thing you know,
Yeah.
so forth and so on. we wind up in a position that we are in now. So for instance, like Janine naturally just started going to bed much earlier. She is like 9 p.m. She's getting ready for bed. By 9:30, she is head to the pillow. For
Come on, I
me, at
hear you.
9:30,
Mm.
I'm just thinking about having my last little
Right.
snack before I even think
Got
about
it.
going to bed. You know what I mean? Like I stay up late. I'm a night owl. Like because I have my summers off, I will stay up until 2, 3 in the morning easily because I'm just wired that way. So by the time
Yeah.
I finally get back to our bedroom, she's already asleep and I'm not trying to bother her. And at first you just kind
Yeah.
of brush all that off and you think, you know what, it's just the season. Like this is just the way it is right now. But your seasons can become habits. And we all know that habits can be tough
Yeah.
to break. You know,
Yeah,
so I
Yeah,
yeah,
wasn't
that's
yeah,
really
yeah.
real. That's
ready a
real.
few years ago when Avery then left for school and for college and we became empty nesters. Like honestly, I thought now that, you know, she's gone, both the girls out of the house, now everything is going to go back to the way they used to be, but it didn't. And by then, I
Got
think
you.
we built up completely different routines. And so I think what really hit me wasn't that we stopped being intimate as often. It was more so realizing that we stopped sharing some of those same moments we used to have together. And that's
Yeah,
Mm.
different. And that's the kind of thing that I think can be a lot bigger if you're not careful with
yeah,
that. And then just one last
definitely.
thing I'll toss in about Janine and I. We also learned that like physical connection means something different for one person compared to the other. Like for me, touching
Yeah.
means a lot. I just need a stroke on the
Yeah.
back, touch my leg, whatever. I just need some of that to know I'm fitting in your life the way that I want to fit in. For
Mm.
Janine, it's less that. She likes kissing. Like that means a lot to her. It doesn't mean the same to me. So I'd say as we
Right.
got older, we started understanding what actually makes the other person feel connected and loved. And so everything started making a lot more sense to us and we could be more intentional about how we acted and reacted toward one another.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. That's
And you
good.
know what? And you know what, Chris? I think for me, in my situation, it was more about health. Now, let me just explain that a
Mm.
little bit. I'm not married. I practice ethical non-monogamy. So it's just a different form of what we all would say is love, right? So my principles are yet the same in some ways because when you think about it, we're looking for that love and we're looking for that optimal time to be able
Mhm.
to, share in a intimate sexual moment, right? So the same dynamics are there, but when you think about, being ethical non-monogamous, that means that you may have more than one partner. And
Mm.
if that is the case, then I think health is still wealth here, right? Now, think about this from this scenario and situation. I'm a black man, at one point had a really big issue with hypertension. And to
Mm.
understand that black men have 40% higher hypertension rates than
Wow.
anybody else, look, stress was one of the
Oof.
things that not only did not want, but I didn't want to continue. So I knew I had to do something for myself to even be able to perform well, right?
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think being able to take myself from 350 plus pounds down to where I am now in the 220s and
It's
understand that
amazing.
what that meant was a lot of hard work to, getting my physical self back to being and really feeling like something,
Mhm.
that improved these other areas. That
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
improved these other areas, not just,
Yeah.
sitting there and laying it down, but also me feeling like I want to actually engage, me
Yeah.
Yeah.
looking at it from the standpoint of, man, am I too big to even be in this
Oh,
situation
that's
right now
good.
Wow.
to,
That's
you know what
good.
I'm
Wow.
saying? So
Wow.
I wanted to be able to do that. So I looked at it from the standpoint of health. Also, you got to think over the years, like you all are saying, intimacy changes. So if
Mm.
Yeah.
intimacy changes, that means that I have to change. I'm being
Mm.
creative. I'm thinking about intimacy before she even gets up in some
Mm.
ways from a
Yeah.
standpoint of how do I want to make sure that I allow her to understand my love? How do I want
Mm.
her to
Oof.
see this appreciation? How do I also want to engage with her to get her in the mood for us to see if we got some time later on
Mm.
to spend in this
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And I like
Yeah.
that playfulness, right? I want to be
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
joke with her the same way that I do when we sitting here watching comedy or sitting here, playing games or whatever it is that we're doing. You know what I'm saying? I want to bring that playfulness, that same interaction into the bedroom as well. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? So
Yeah.
when I think about that, also you still got to finish,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
leading up to all that to get to the moment where you can get into it and you still got to finish. So what does that
I
tell
love
me?
it.
That tells me in
Yeah.
some ways my testosterone still got to be up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I look at it, I look at the fact that testosterone
I love
declines
it.
1% year after year once you hit 30 years old. That means
Damn.
at this point in time, that might be a cool 15. You know what I'm
Oof.
saying? Right there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if it's a
Yeah.
cool 15, if it's a cool 15 off the top, this body got to be feeling good. I got to be
Right.
Yeah.
making sure that if I am not pleasing in certain areas, that I gotta understand what I gotta do next to make sure that I'm always
Damn.
optimal. You know what I'm saying?
That's a lot of
So
work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
That's a
work.
lot of work.
I feel
That's a
hey,
you
lot of
though.
work. That's a
hey,
lot
That's a
of
lot of
hey,
work.
work. That's
It's a
good
lot of
stuff.
work, especially in your ethical non-monogamy. That's a lot of
come
work.
on, come on,
You
come
know what
on,
I mean?
come
I
on,
mean,
So
because
come
think
on.
it's
about it,
like,
because we're not just talking about the physical side of it, like, that takes up enough work
that's right.
in and of
That's
itself,
right.
but it's like we're also
That's
talking about
right.
that emotional side, that vulnerability, and learning everybody else's love language, and what's
That's
funny
right.
about it too,
Yeah.
and I ask you this, do you feel like you might be the same person, but do you feel like you need a slightly different love language from each person? You know what I
Uh,
mean? Or do you just
There
need them to all
is, there
treat you one
is.
way? Yeah.
I think what it is that what I understand is that it's me being more educated about the differences
Hmm,
that they have,
hmm,
and then making sure they understand where I am different, right?
mhm,
yeah.
Because
mhm,
they may have other partners as well, and they have to kind of make sure that we're all seeing that
yeah.
all of us are different, right? So
Dang.
when it comes down to it,
Mm.
I take it's a dedication. It is.
Yeah,
It's
it
a
has to be.
dedication. It's a
That's a full-time
dedication
job.
It's a
in
full-time job.
learning because you want to be able to appreciate them,
Mm,
in all ways, but especially when it comes down to that physical intimacy, you
mm,
want to make sure that they understand that you were listening, that you understood how to,
mm.
to bring in those elements that they really want, and that you got a couple tricks up your sleeve that they've been waiting for. So
Yeah, yeah.
you gotta be intentional for sure.
And
Yeah, wow.
I think it's interesting too, like, to Quest's point, what he mentioned, being able to recognize love languages. Women, humans are always changing. So even no
Mm,
matter your makeup, no matter what your choice is, I think love languages change as you all grow into each
absolutely.
other and with each other. And I think about over the course of my relationship with my babe, our love languages have shifted. And we've
Mm,
only, again, been married for a short period of time, but we've been together for a few years. So I
Mhm.
mm,
think about the things that once were important to us in the beginning have still been there. They still are there, but I still
mhm,
think love languages change and grow. And being
Mhm.
present to all of those changes is important. I love the things that you all mentioned
mhm,
about how you have to think about all these things with a level of intentionality. And I
mm,
think
yeah.
Yes.
that's really what's important, making sure that you don't miss out on your partner. It's like you always have to be thinking about what's next. And the minute that
Mhm,
you stop
mhm,
thinking about what's next, that catches up with you. And I think a lot of black men get very lazy. They get
mm,
very, complacent in
Yeah.
terms
mm.
of what they
Wow,
feel is necessary to keep the relationship where it needs to be. And I think
that's
that's
real.
also impacts the desire gap. We talked about different statistics. They talked about 50% in black relationships and marriages experience this desire gap,
Mm,
15 years or plus into the relationship. I believe it can also happen much sooner as well. You know,
mhm,
Mhm.
how you define intimacy is important too. It's not just about the physical, it's also about the things that aren't physical at all.
yeah,
So
Definitely.
I think,
Definitely.
such
you
a good
got to
point.
think about all those things as you talk about what does it mean to desire someone. And then quite something that hit me too. And I know I'm hitting a couple different places, but it was like, not only do I want to make sure I desire her, but I want to make sure that I'm desirable
Yeah,
Mhm,
definitely.
yep,
Definitely.
myself, how
Off
I
the top.
look, how I take care
yeah,
of myself. Am I smelling
Off the
good?
top. Off the
Is my
top.
right,
fade tight? Right? Like
right,
all the
right, right.
things you want to make sure that you're keeping top of mind. And I think black men get very comfortable and complacent
Mm,
once they have gotten their queen. And then all of a sudden, they don't really keep up with themselves like they once
oof,
did when they first got it.
Well, let me
Man,
let
that's
me let
real.
me come back into frame a little bit because it sounds like there's some opportunity for us to discuss some of them places that we avoid the real conversation too. So,
Hmm, hmm.
CJ, I know we in some ways talked about this outside of
Yeah.
the space here, but I want to bring this back into frame for you
Okay, okay.
to take us there because I think this is a
Yeah.
good part for us to kind of cross over into this.
No, I agree. I agree. Like as Jamie was talking about that, he was talking about that complacency that sets in and how we as men can get satisfied and get comfortable. And it's as that's happening, we're also then potentially hiding behind some things that can be really respectable. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do as a man. I'm providing, I'm working, I'm staying busy, I'm taking care of everybody else without concern for being taken care of in return. We might want to be taken care of in some kind of way, but as black men, we know how that is. We don't really verbalize that the way that we could. We don't
Yeah, yeah.
exist in that vulnerable space. So we don't let our partner know the ways we prefer being taken care of. And so the working, the providing, the staying busy, the taking care of everyone else, etc. All of those are good things until they become places where we hide. You know what I mean? So like
Mm.
sometimes it's easier for us to be like, well, I'm gonna go mow the lawn. I'd rather do that than to admit I'm scared that things have changed. You know, I sometimes it's
Yeah,
easier to stay on the phone for another hour and keep doom scrolling than it is to risk reaching over to your spouse on the other side of the bed wondering if your advances are going to be rejected, you know? And
yeah,
so I think
yeah,
even when
yeah,
I think about
yeah.
myself, if I'm being really honest
Oh,
about it, like I think I hid behind some of those routines in the same way. And I just
yeah.
kind of accepted that that's what it was. Like, this is how life was about to work now. And I stopped asking whether we were intentionally creating connection. And instead, it was like, are we just managing this life together and riding off contentedly into the sunset? And I felt like we were headed that direction for a while. But finally, I was able to identify like something just doesn't feel right. And it's from that honest
Yeah.
place. That's what I think is allowing me and Johnny to keep growing beyond that naturally occurring divide.
That's
Mm,
that's
mhm.
really what's up. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
good. That's good. I love what you talked about, CJ, just in terms of how it can be so subtle.
mm,
How
yep.
how it could just be like you get into these routines and then all of a sudden you completely on a whole different planet and you like, how did I get here?
Hmm.
And I think also too, I can't help but think about just the exhaustion that comes with all the things that we're having to do to accomplish. You got the grind, you
Phew.
got what you want to
Mm,
accomplish. Then you got to make sure you're thinking about, okay, am I taking care of my lady or am I taking care of my partner? Okay, am I meeting my spiritual and life goals and all these things?
mm.
And then you reach this thing where you kind of like, dang, I'm kind of tired. I'm tired. I'm kind of sexed out. I ain't got much time left. Nothing. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
man, this thing know everything. You like, I just want to lay down. And before you know it, it's time to get it all in over again. So,
yeah, yeah,
it really, really pawns the question of, making time for this thing that's so important in your relationship.
yeah.
That's really, really good, Jay. What else did you have to say there? Because I wanted
No,
to ask a question.
go ahead, go ahead.
So I really feel that exhaustion is real. Do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
ever have moments where your wife looks at you like, "Are you kidding me?" You ever had like she looking at you like, were you tired? Like for
Yeah.
real?
Yeah, yeah. Heck
That's
yeah.
funny. That's funny.
Heck
That's
yeah.
funny.
Heck yeah. And I can't help but think like, do you know what I did today, girl? You know
Come
what I
on,
mean?
I
Do you
hear
know
you. I
all
hear
the
that.
things that I accomplished today? And all of a sudden that don't matter because this thing is something that's so important that we could lose sight
Mm.
of art. So it's attention, man.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
how you
Yeah.
balance it is so important. I think it's figuring out what routines and what rhythms are important for
Yeah.
you and your wife and having those communications with your partner to be like, okay, when are we going to make time for this?
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
us, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna be tired in the morning. Let's get it in
Mm.
the morning. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
we fresh, we can be present to each other. We no longer have to be, don't nobody want no tired sex. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So that's something that we figured out that works well for us.
Yeah.
And then man, it makes the whole day go so much better. You be floating like, okay, okay.
Mm.
I hear
it's
you.
amazing, amazing the connection that sex has to how you deal with tension and stress.
Man,
Because it
Right?
seems like the things that
Come
that's
would
on.
piss
real.
you off, you'd be like, Whatever, man. Like, I'm cool. I'm connected with my
Yeah,
babe. We good. That ain't really bothering me, you
yeah,
know?
Man.
yeah,
And so it's like we've developed this routine where it's like, because sleep is just as important, you know?
Sure.
yeah,
So we don't
Definitely,
want to take that
definitely, if
away
not
from it
more.
either. So if anything, that's just one thing that we figured out that worked for us. I ain't saying what's gonna
yeah.
work for everybody, but
Right.
that definitely is something that, we found that works for us.